I think businesses are going to begin to collaborate with government organizations to figure out this regulation mess. Because if you put traditional types of rules in place over technology, businesses just optimize to get around it. And that's not the spirit of the regulation. That's not the point. The point is to protect people. Now we are very focused on driving outcomes. We're starting to work with senior leadership and just understanding from a strategy standpoint, what do you need from us as a data science team? We're starting to deliver revenue and cost savings. We're beginning to do the things that other organizations expect of a growing field of a valuable technology. And that's what I think the future is for us, is this increasing alignment with business. Sometimes a business is a lack of options. I had to make my own opportunities.
Mm.
There wasn't anyone who was going to give me the chance that I wanted. I knew I could provide the most value if I was given. And when someone won't do that, when a company won't give you the opportunity, especially at a senior point in your career, because I was at about 15 years
Yeah.
at that point, you're going to, at some point in your career, have to make your own opportunities.
Hello there, and welcome to the Richmond Alake Podcast. This week, I am speaking with Vin Vashishta. Vin has over 25 years within the tech field and has dedicated 10 of that to the AI and data domain. And Vin focuses on AI strategy. Vin helps business think about AI from a strategic standpoint, which includes thinking about the technical aspect and also the business aspect, all the way down to actually hiring data practitioner. So for you, this is the ideal conversation to understand how you can position yourself as a thought leader within the field and actually articulate yourself as one. That's really what I got from this conversation with Vin. I'm Richmond Alake, and one person at a time, I'm exploring the stories of the humans behind AI and data. I hope you enjoy this conversation and come away a better practitioner. Thank you for listening. It is great to have you, Vin. Having a conversation with you has been the top of my list. You've been recommended by tons of folks. I've spoken to a number of individuals, and you are seen as a person of authority within this data and machine learning domain. And this perception others have of you comes from your expertise and experience within this field. You have over 25 years in tech, and you've dedicated 10 of that, more now, to data science and machine learning. So we can start with my first question. It's rather broad, but as someone who's been involved in the data field for a while in AI and machine learning, where do you see the field going within the next 10 years?
Thanks for having me first. I really appreciate you having me on. When it comes to the future of AI, I think the most interesting pieces of our future, number one is the alignment with business needs. For the first 7 years that I was in this field, I started in 2012, majority of data science teams were disconnected from the business. They did sometimes valuable work, but for the most part, the business had one idea of what data science was. The data science team had an idea of what the business needed, and those two didn't line up. And so going forward, I think the biggest piece of the future of data science, machine learning, is that we've started syncing up with the business over the last 3 to 4 years. Now we are very focused on driving outcomes. We're starting to work with senior leadership and just understanding from a strategy standpoint, what do you need from us as a data science team? We're starting to deliver revenue and cost savings. We're beginning to do the things that other organizations expect of a growing field of a valuable technology. And that's what I think the future is for us, is this increasing alignment with business. And what we're going to do is realize that what data science, machine learning, and deep learning can do right now for businesses is extraordinarily valuable. There is definitely the debate at the high end of the field where it doesn't work perfectly. Deep learning is at this plateau. I 100% disagree with that, because businesses haven't seen what you can do with, mid-level. They've gotten through the simplistic approaches, but I don't think they've seen what you can do with mid-level machine learning and really basic deep learning. And once they do, once they make that realization, the leap from machine learning to research and doing applied research and bringing in experimental processes and methodologies, then you start getting these research artifacts that are competitive advantages. And so even, like I said, just basic concepts of data science, basic best practices, all of a sudden they generate a ridiculous value for the business. And so I think you're going to see this pushback against the narrative of, oh, we've plateaued and oh, it doesn't work so well. Because for the business, it doesn't have to work 95 or 100%. In many cases, an 80% accurate model or even 60% is an improvement over what they have now by leaps and bounds. And it creates an advantage for any company that can use data science and machine learning for internal automation, which preserves margins, especially in inflationary times. That margin preservation piece is critical. So I think you're going to see us pushing towards automation. I also think that companies that can create machine learning based products also have a significant competitive advantage because they can offer features and functionality that their competitors can't. So if you're looking at a company that can't get models into production versus a company that can, the company that can't get models into production can't compete. I mean, if you don't get to the point where you can do that this year or at least by early next year, how do you compete? You can't compete on price. You can't compete on functionality. What are you going to do? I mean, just improving customer service, it's not going to get you there. And so that's where I see the future of data science and machine learning. And looking a little bit further out, I think when you start seeing these companies as platforms, companies like Facebook are starting to have a platform business model. Companies like Alphabet, Amazon, many of the large tech companies, but now even some of the players like Walmart. You look at finance, the finance space, you see a lot of companies that are businesses as platforms. We're going to be the core. Anytime you have an ecosystem, like Uber has an ecosystem of drivers and riders, anytime you have an ecosystem that interacts with each other on a platform, you must have machine learning. And so this concept of centralized platforms and eventually Web3 decentralized platforms, they require data science and machine learning at the core of the platform to enable functionality. And that's really, you look 2 to 3 years into the future, that's where we're going. Because for the first time, machine learning is going to be the enabling technology for another technology, for that next wave that's coming. And I think that's really, those two trends, I think, are the most fascinating to explore.
I love the fact you spoke about business alignment as where you see the field going towards. And one idea that I've been playing about with where the field is going is data science and machine learning aligning with policies and regulations of governments. Business and data scientists aligning with the government policies, with ethical reviews coming and policy changes coming. I can see within the next 5 years, a lot of data scientists, at least at the managerial level, at the strategy level, like yourself, starting to incorporate some form of AI ethics and policy within that pipeline. Do you have any thoughts into this?
Well, I talk about, and this is actually something that I'm building out some content for on my Substack, is this concept of AI governance. So the first post that I'm going to do is defining where AI governance fits in overall AI strategy and then connect it to the larger business strategy. Because governance is the business really making sure business needs and core strategy drives AI strategy. So the business has a voice, but it doesn't have to manage the technical side of it. It doesn't have to manage the technology because senior leaders are not good at that. They don't have time to do that. They want to manage value creation. And so the concept of AI governance is where you begin to bring in the regulatory aspects as well, because the business has not only business needs, but also an environment that it operates in. So it incorporates customer needs, it incorporates competitive forces, but now we have regulation coming on, and it's another layer to the concept of AI governance. And so that's where I see it fitting in the business, is you're going to have that business strategic or data scientist strategist role really leading this concept of AI governance, connecting your senior leaders with your data science team, your data and analytics organization, helping the two communicate with each other and building this AI governance framework. Because business to business, it's going to be different. There isn't, this canned model. Everyone's trying to create these standardized, it doesn't work. Machine learning by nature is an intelligent process. You can't put hard and fast rules around it and expect them to work. You can't innovate. You cannot continually improve a model if you have too rigid of an AI governance framework. And so I think that's where this collaborative approach comes into play, is that you have to have a customized AI governance framework, business to business. That's a collaboration between teams. And also, I think businesses are going to begin to collaborate with government organizations to figure out this regulation mess. Because if you put traditional types of rules in place over technology, businesses just optimize to get around it. And that's not the spirit of the regulation. That's not the point. The point is to protect people. It's not, about data privacy or any of these bigger, larger, ideals. Really, the thing is we want to protect people. We want to make sure that people are in control of their lives, really. And no one's going to disagree with that at a fundamental level, because if you look at customer satisfaction from a business standpoint, we don't want customers to feel like they're out of control. We want interactions with the business brand to be positive. We don't want them to feel like we're stealing their data. We don't want them to feel like we're pushing models in front of them that are treating them unfairly or providing a poor experience. And that aligns with what government is looking to do. They want to make sure that we're not, as businesses and as data scientists, doing harm to society. And so the goals align. All that has to happen is we create frameworks that make sense, because right now we don't have qualified people at the policy level who can build anything that's going to, number one, work the way they think it does. And number two, really deal with a forward-looking view of not where we are right now, because many privacy battles have already been lost. This data is already out there. We've already lost some battles. And so if we're not looking forward, we're going to just continue to lose battles and try to react to the battles that we've lost, instead of looking ahead and saying, okay, how do we secure the next 5 years, not try to clean up the last 5 years?
And one thing is, I see this role of AI policy advisor, AI ethics advisor coming up, and your role of AI strategies and AI strategists coming up as well over the years coming. And you mentioned that it doesn't need to be technical, that this role doesn't need to involve the technical aspects, but can we actually not involve the technical considerations within this role? Can we actually get around that?
Well, the data scientist strategist is the technical side of this. They are a data scientist who is now competent as a strategist, who uses models to build and guide core strategy. And that's the important piece about the data scientist strategist, is it's that hybrid role. Then you would talk about AI ethicist. Again, that's someone who understands the policy side and the society and regulatory side, but who also is a data scientist. And so you have another hybrid skill set. And so they're the technical pieces of this governance framework. When I say that you can't be technical, I mean from a senior leadership standpoint. They're not going to be including data scientists in the C-suite for probably another 5 to 6 years. But at some point very soon, you're going to struggle to be a CTO, a CIO, if you are not a data scientist. And I think looking more like 10 years down the road, I don't think you'll be able to be a CEO if you're not a data scientist. I don't think there will be a C-suite role that will not require data science capabilities. I think that's where we're going. Data science literacy is a 5-year must-have plan for companies to look at internal training and upskilling. But looking further out, I mean, data science is going to get easier over the next 10 years. And so you're not going to have the PhD or master's background in order to be a data scientist anymore. We're going to have tools to help us out with that. At the same time, you are going to need to be able to build your own models in any sort of high-level leadership role. If you can't do that, it's going to get really hard to function.
We're going to dive into the masters and qualifications needed for data scientists today, but I want to actually talk about how you yourself collaborate and relate to businesses. So you're the founder of V Squared, and it's a company focused on formulating AI and data strategies for businesses. And most practitioners that are listening to this, including myself, are familiar with engineering, research, and theory aspects of AI, but AI strategy is it isn't in any curriculum. To be fair, I didn't learn it at university at the master's level, didn't learn it at the bachelor's level. And it eludes many practitioners such as myself. So what is AI strategy?
Well, it's a different paradigm. There's a hard line between legacy strategy and modern strategy. Data enables a new approach to strategy planning. And this is why I emphasize the data scientist strategist role. And like you said, there is no curriculum out there. I created one. I actually have a class called Business Strategy for Data Scientists, where I'm training data scientists into that data scientist strategist role, because you're right, there's no curriculum for this. And the reason for that is you have to look at strategy as being fundamentally different now that you can build models as a data scientist that can dictate the optimal courses of action for strategy planning process. And now senior leadership doesn't have to guess. Legacy strategy planning basically used data to support a conclusion, and then they tested that conclusion in production. They deployed a strategy that had limited data support into the business's strategy and hoped it would work. That's legacy strategy planning, because that's all you had. But now that you have models and we can model more increasingly complex business systems, things like customers, competitors, supply chains, you can now begin to understand your business better. You can begin to understand your customers better. Now, models through decision support systems can guide core strategy. That's the difference. That's where AI is changing strategy, and you have to redefine strategy completely. It's no longer something that fits the traditional box. Pre-2010, pre-2015 strategy is legacy, and you almost have to abandon many of the concepts and constructs in order to build a new framework and build modern strategy. And so the data scientist strategist is critical, because strategy now involves using models. And if you don't have that capability within your data science team, you're missing the highest value generation that a data scientist can contribute to a business. That really is creating near dominant strategies using models to help guide better decision making, to help senior leaders understand this ridiculously complex environment that they function in right now. Because if you talk to senior leaders, that's all they say is complexity is rising, complexity is rising, complexity is rising, uncertainty is increasing. We need more data, but that data has to be more rigorous. It has to be more reliable. It has to be delivered just in time, so it's not overwhelming. We need it at the right time, at the point of decision making, so that we can make the optimal decisions. So we can understand all the opportunities in front of us, so we can see the landscape for threats. And we don't need this massive, ridiculous dashboard. We need exactly what data. We need context behind every data point. And then we need you to give us a level of confidence that this is actually what's going to happen. And that's the interesting piece about where data science is going when I talk about business alignment. Reliability requirements are increasing, whether that's customer facing products, whether that's internal automation, or like I'm talking about now, strategy supporting decision support systems. It has to work. It has to have a high level of reliability and confidence. It has to do what we say it does. It doesn't have to be perfect, because there's continually a person in the loop. And I think that's where the excitement really comes in, is you look at where I'm focused on, which is building models to support strategy. And that's a core business function. And that's really exciting, because you can improve in so many different ways using fairly basic approaches and then slowly becoming more advanced as needed to improve strategy planning, to improve business outcomes and decision quality. There's just so much opportunity here.
You mentioned this data scientists predicting essentially the business outcomes using models. And one thing that came to my mind was Zillow, right? They basically did that. They used machine learning models to essentially project or essentially guide their business strategy. And that led to the acquisitions of loads of homes at a very high valuation, but it backfired. right? Is there such a thing as over-reliance on the strategies that are basically coming out of processes from AI?
The missing component there was the reliability requirement. And that's something, I ended up writing what happened and what went wrong with Zillow. What went wrong there is they were using more descriptive modeling when prescriptive modeling and predictive modeling, which is what they needed, has a higher reliability requirement. So what was interesting is the C-suite articulated, we have this very narrow range where if we don't hit this sweet spot, we won't make money. They articulated that to the data science team, and then somehow the models that got delivered weren't delivered with the message of, yeah, this is probably not going to meet that threshold of reliability requirements. And so if you don't have that alignment where senior leadership articulates a reliability requirement and is able to understand the models well enough that are being presented to say, this doesn't meet our reliability requirement, that's where you have a danger, is where you have that disconnect, because traditional data science and machine learning without a research cycle cannot produce anything that is reliable enough to do exactly what Zillow was trying to do. And that's, the danger is that companies don't get advertised. Like there's no big flashing sign that says, hey, you've gone from descriptive models are going to work really, really well to you need a higher level of evidence to support any model that you have now. And Zillow just ran past that line without coming to terms with the amount of investment it would take to build out a research team and to actually do the experimentation required to build a body of evidence to support their model's functionality, model's inference. They didn't do any of that. And so that was the disconnect, is if you go from, yes, describing what's happening now, and then just extending that trend line out is enough to, now we're putting a business model around this. It better work. It needs to be far more reliable. And if you cross that line without being intentional and having people on staff who understand what it takes to actually do predictive modeling and prescriptive modeling, if you don't have people on staff that understand the difference, you're in the danger zone. I mean, that's really where a lot of businesses are finding themselves right now. They're overextending their data, they're overextending their data science capabilities, and they don't have anyone there to sound the alarm.
So I want to sort of dive into this descriptive modeling. Firstly, what does it really mean? Because I would assume that taking a predictive modeling approach or any modeling approach is using past data to infer future results. What is descriptive modeling?
So what you're talking about is essentially a type of experiment. It's an observational experiment. That's what we do for a living as data scientists. But if we don't advertise the limitations of an observational experiment, we're in a lot of trouble. When you build a machine learning model, you got to dive down into what is that really? Most machine learning models, I call them hypotheses, because what a machine learning model does at first is it's just a transformation of the data. That's all it is. The inference is just basically a SQL query. If you don't do your modeling with any more rigor than just, you import your data frame, you train, test, validate, and then you ship it. That doesn't work. That's a descriptive model because it's just a transformation of the data. Like I said, it's a really expensive SQL query. And so that has value though. That's not valueless. Businesses, if you have a person who understands, who has the data literacy to understand that this is just telling me what's happening right now and giving me a very advanced view of what's happening right now. And it allows me to explore the data. And that's what a great machine learning model does, is it allows a user to explore the data in a far more user-friendly and straightforward way than they would really with any other approach. And so that's the great power of a descriptive model, but we don't advertise it that way enough. Most of our field says import data, train, test, validate, ship it, and that's a reliable model because here's my, whatever accuracy metric. What? That's insanity. And we have to back away from that approach because we've just overextended data. If we say this can predict anything, it can't. It's just a reflection of the data. There's nothing beyond that, but it's a great hypothesis. That's the wonderful thing about models, is they can propose things that are based on complex relationships within the data. It can propose ideas or frameworks for us to evaluate as people. But there's another step. If we want to say this framework is accurate and the inference will hold over time, you got to do more. You can't just ship it. That's not going to work. And that's what I mean by there's that cliff. When you go from this is a great exploratory data tool to I'm shipping this to production, it's going to run, and we're going to put a business model on top of it. I don't care how big your data set is. I don't care how advanced your train, test, and validation processes are. I don't care how many models you've evaluated against each other. You can't do that. You don't have any evidence. And so you have to then rely on more rigorous observational studies. Eventually, you have to go into more rigorous experimental methods. You have to continue to validate and create a body of evidence for the inference that's being served. You're validating your hypothesis, and you're looking for, once you get into causal logic and causal methodologies, you begin to look for and evaluate counterfactuals. You begin to look for causal relationships between variables to truly understand the system that you're modeling. And that's where we get lost, is there's a gap between basic data science and your more rigorous processes, the research lifecycle that will actually create a body of evidence to support that this model will hold. And if you talk to hard sciences people, they hate data scientists because we ship stuff that doesn't work and we pretend it does. And that just infuriates hard sciences groups who have been doing this forever and who are held to a ridiculously higher standard than we are. But yet we get all the business investment, we get all the interest, we got all the hype. And it's funny because there's only about 10% of us that talk about data science in this 3-tiered, where you've got descriptive, predictive, prescriptive, and each one has an increasingly high level. And I would say it's like a log scale. It's not like, it's not linearly more evidence. I mean, it's significantly more evidence to support the fact that your models actually found something, that it works, that some small data drift isn't going to send it off the rails. So there's just so much more that you have to do in order to support models doing anything aside from allowing people to interact with their data in an easier, more straightforward way.
And you use V squared as sort of like an extension of yourself to do that exactly for business, to go into business and actually look at the data, look at the team, look at what the business is trying to achieve, and sort of relate the two. But the question is, how did V squared start? How did it all start?
So I got laid off almost 10 years to today. I got laid off from my last corporate job. And I had this idea, I'd already worked with a couple of early clients that you could use data to model customer behavior, that you could use that data that you had and you could begin to get a better understanding of your customers. So you can improve pricing strategy, you can improve your marketing effectiveness. I mean, there's so many different ways you can improve product development. You can make choices about your features based on what customers actually wanted. I loved the Steve Jobs concept of delighting your customers. So that's where it all started. I thought I was going to help people out, with customer development, with marketing, with all of those pricing strategy. No, the first people that actually wanted me to do this were in manufacturing. Supply chain was my first and earliest use case because manufacturing through Six Sigma and Lean, they had already adopted data-driven approaches. And so my first opportunities were really in supply chain optimization, supplier discovery, and that transformed from early success stories there to marketing teams going, wait, you said you wanted to do what again? Now that I had some success behind me, I could actually do the things that I wanted to do in the higher value use cases that I thought I could get through. But it's interesting, in the early days, I trying to get traction for this was so hard. I didn't know what data science was. Those words didn't come into my vocabulary until the beginning of 2013. It was, we were using data and advanced analytics and big data. And so, it was, those first few years were really the wild, wild west of data science, where we were figuring it out and we would have these projects that were just home runs and then trying to figure out how to duplicate that, how to do it more than one, more than one time, not being a one hit wonder within the company. They were great days, a lot of fun, a lot of learning.
So one thing I want to sort of dive into is confidence, right? So you got laid off, but you had the confidence to actually just say, okay, I'm not going to work for another company. I'm going to start mine. I'm going to solve large scale problems. And obviously, by solving this large scale problem, you're getting, hopefully, the big buck. How do you get that confidence? How do you go from being laid off to saying, okay, let's do this. Let's start V squared?
Sometimes you have to. One of my favorite sayings is, it's not a matter of can, you must.
Okay.
And that's what V squared was. I went into a couple of interviews. They didn't go well. I interviewed or I tried to get in at some larger companies, Microsoft and Amazon. They didn't even call me back. The interviews I did get went badly. And so it wasn't really a matter of confidence, even though I'll be honest, in those early days, I had irrational confidence that I was going to be able to make this work. But it was also, sometimes a business is a lack of options. I had to make my own opportunities.
Hmm.
There wasn't anyone who was going to give me the chance that I wanted. I knew I could provide the most value if I was given. And when someone won't do that, when a company won't give you the opportunity, especially at a senior point in your career, because I was at about 15 years at that point, you're going to, at some point in your career, have to make your own opportunities. And so it's not really about having confidence in any one thing versus another. I mean, I had confidence in the idea. That's really what it was, is I can use data to drive outcomes. And that was the idea. And I had confidence in that idea. I knew I could make it work because I had seen it work. And that was my source of confidence, was just, hey, you give me a chance. I know I can do this. Why? I've seen it. I've done it. And, when you ask where irrational confidence comes in, sometimes it's not in yourself. Sometimes it's the strength of the idea, and just knowing it's right can be enough to propel you to do some pretty amazing things. And that's what it was for me. Number one, it wasn't a choice of a lack of options. And number two, I had that irrational confidence in this idea because I'd seen it work.
That's interesting. And you spoke about the interview process, and I want to actually go into that. So now you've gone from not getting the not having Amazon and Microsoft calling you back to hiring hundreds of machine learning practitioners for businesses. And you understand at a very unique level what hiring managers and companies are looking for from us, from the machine learning practitioners, when we apply for the jobs. So let's start here. Let's start with exploring AI roles. Then we can move into the interview aspect. So what areas of AI are currently difficult to hire for? Because that would tell me where I need to get the skills and get the money for. So yeah.
All of them across the board. Because, and I talked about this in a post, a couple of days ago, where there are people with 5, 10 years of experience who've never shipped anything to production. There are people with 10 years of experience who, for the last 3 years, haven't shipped anything to production. And that's the problem, is we have tons and tons of data scientists who are looking for jobs, and companies are changing the way they evaluate data scientists because, again, it's this alignment with business value. So they're looking for data scientists who can deliver. And this is something that actually Facebook did, I want to say 5 years ago. They started doing this with Instagram, and then Facebook as a whole sort of adopted that same approach, where they were saying, no, we're looking for people that actually want to build stuff and put it in production, that want to build products and it was a shift in focus for them. That's where almost every business now finds itself. And when you do a rigorous interview, you begin to realize how few people have any sort of production facing, value centric experience. And so I think the field is wide open for anyone that can prove I can do this in the real world. I can deliver business value. I think that's the huge opportunity now, because companies are kind of desperate. When I get clients now, they'll bring me in to build out a team. And the last one I built was a small one. It was just 4 people. Well, they're adding on 4 people. There were 2 already there. So small group that we had to add on. But I can't tell you, if I didn't have the network I have, how hard it would have been was screening through resumes to try to find people who had really done it. And there is a level of desperation, like I get an, oh, thank God somebody's going to do this hiring for us. Oh, you're going to do the strategy. So, oh, thank you. You're going to do the strategy planning. Thank you. Thank you. I don't want to do that. You'll find the business doesn't want to do it. Recruiters and HR don't want to do it. The team doesn't really have the bandwidth or, really training to be effective hirers. There's no one in business right now that wants to do the hiring. So if you can show up and show business value, that they might trust you to watch their kids for the weekend. I mean, that's really where they are right now, is they're just dying.
I want to label this area of machine learning you're talking about, moving stuff into production and creating value. So it sounds like you're talking about ML ops, right? And data engineering.
It's across the board. It
Okay.
is 100% across the board. Because if you look at what they think, there's this what we think they do and what they actually do that provides value. When you look at a machine learning engineer, there's the perception of what they do, but what they really do is take models from data scientists and productize them. That's what they do. And so that more rigorous research process that I'm talking about, we have to write production grade code as data scientists, even in just applied research roles. Why? Because the MLE, what are they going to do if it's not production grade? How do they know how to rebuild it so it is? That's not feasible. They are going to have to do integration with it, but they shouldn't have to rebuild it from zero. Like you can't make your MLEs do that. And so you have to have that production level skill in your data scientists as well, even though they do applied research and that's their main value generation.
Okay.
Artifacts still have to be able to go to production. And so your MLEs are really figuring out how to integrate these artifacts into multiple products and reuse them over and over again and basically build out a platform around them so that people can get access to the functionality of the model or to that data set in the best, most efficient way possible. You have data engineers and they say, oh, you're building high pipelines. No, data engineers don't build that's not the main focus. You could almost automate a third of pipeline development. That's not what they do that's valuable. They curate data sets. They create catalogs. They create valuable data sets because they understand data science. They understand the projects that are in the pipeline. They understand what the data scientists are working on. So they build a catalog that the data scientists can look at and go, oh, yeah, I definitely need that. Oh, this could help me here. And, that's the value add, because now you have somebody who can partner with your data scientists and who kind of understands their needs and gets in front of them. So a data scientist who's stuck on a project, what do? You find a new new model to play with, or you get some better data, get some new data. And that's where the curation part comes into play, is that anticipation of data needs and that curation of high quality data sets. Instead of focusing on cleaning data, the focus is on just building it right from the start. And that's the curation aspect of the data engineering role. And those are all the business value pieces. When you talk about ML ops, that's almost becoming like a fourth branch, where ML engineers used to be sort of stuck with this. And now it's a specialized role in and of itself.
Exactly.
And the value that they bring is they prevent catastrophic things from happening in production. They do things like failover. They manage models running in shadow. They have a constant monitoring that gets in front of drift. So they're looking at the data for signs that something has happened in the data that will impact the model. And so they're preventing failure instead of waiting for it to happen and then saying, oh, my model isn't performing well. It's like, well, why aren't you watching the data? How did you not see that coming? Because what's going to impact this model, right? If you know what's going to impact it, why aren't you looking for that? You look at ML ops, and that's their power, is that they're getting in front of failures. They're preventing failures. They're creating a level of quality, management, true quality assurance, where they're making sure that model doesn't die catastrophically or fail and do something horrific, serve prices at a penny because the data's drifted so bad. It's just malfunction. So you want to have people focused on business value, not the perception of what all these groups were supposed to be doing, which is not right.
That is a very extensive perspective on it. As in, one thing you did mention was having to go through loads of resumes. when you're hiring for these positions, right? I want to ask you a question that has been lingering. What filters do you use when you're hiring for machine learning related jobs, right? So how do you take the 100 resume to 10 to 5?
I'm looking for results, and that's really what I'm looking for is, do you tell me what model architectures you use, or do you tell me I used this to deliver this value? Are you explaining a connection between what you do and some sort of business outcome? Do you have a connection with users? I'm just looking for results at first, and that's really what I'm skimming for. Improve something by X%, increased revenue by, decreased cost by, helped save X hours. Give me a result. Give me a tangible business outcome, because that tells me you care. That tells me that there was a genuine connection between you and the project and the users, not just the technology. And so once I've got that, now I'm looking for people who have worked on similar projects to the one that the ones that I have in the pipeline that I'm really hiring for over the next 6 months. But I'm also looking for something else. I need the majority of the hires to be able to contribute to those projects pretty much immediately. Nobody hits the ground running. That's a lie. It takes 3 months to get anyone, doesn't matter how good they are, to speed, to the point where they can contribute, at 100% of what they're capable of. But I'm looking for people that I can teach. If there is somebody with extraordinary capability, I want to bring that person in, even if they don't have extraordinary experience or extraordinary fit, because I'm not just staffing for the next 6 months, I'm staffing for the next 5 years. And so I need people that are going to contribute, 6 to 18 months, but I also need people that are going to grow next 2 to 4 years, because this team's getting bigger. It's not going to stay the same size. Investment in data science, if I do my job right, is going to increase over the next 5 years because it's producing revenue, saving the company money. There's a reason to invest in this organization, because this organization is returning better than alternative areas of investment. So if I'm doing my job right, this group's going to grow. It's going to need new leaders. It's going to need people to go from junior to senior level fairly quickly. You're going to have increasing business demands that are more knowledge intensive. That workflow and life cycle is going to expand. I need people who can grow into these roles in the next 2 to 4 years. And if I'm just hiring for the next 6 to 18 months, I have to screen for two things. I have to screen for today and I have to screen for tomorrow.
Okay. So you're basically looking at, firstly, the ability to grow. Second, value. They'd have to be very value centric.
Mhm.
And that leads me to the next question, because, for example, someone like me, when I came out of university with my master's, I had a qualification, but I didn't have that business correlation or the value drive that you have on my CV. So how important to you, as someone that's hired hundreds of people, how important is an AI degree for the roles that you're hiring for? Is this part of your filter?
I want to know that you learned something. That's the difference, is there you can go to school and come out not having learned very much. Did you do any projects? Were you genuinely interested in the field? If you were, you probably have one or two projects that you did during school, because that's just, it's part of classwork. And then if you have a genuine interest, you probably picked that project up and kept it going. And so I'm looking for someone that learned. I'm looking for someone that took a project and kept working with it, kept playing with it. I look for any sort of content contribution. A lot of people, as they learn, they write up what they've learned. That's another way that you can tell me, you do actually like this field. It's like, it wasn't just well, I had to pick a major and this was the one. This one seemed to pay a lot, but it shows me that you have a genuine interest or an aptitude or something, and you have the ability to teach others. That's one of those long-term, what am I looking for? Looking for long-term. That's a great skill to have long-term. If you have a GitHub repo, if you developed in public, that's huge too. If you pushed out your code into a repository, you kept cleaning it up, making it better. Maybe you kept tracking college projects as you went along. Again, great sign. I can look at what it is that you've done. I can evaluate your code for cleanliness, for accuracy, as far as best practices are concerned. I can look at your style. I can look at the way that you've matured in some cases. I mean, that's a cool thing you could do with reposts. I can look at your code 2 years ago and I can look at your code like the last commit you did and go, wow, okay, that's better. And those little things that sometimes students feel like they have to hide. And it's like, no, we all been there. Don't, don't feel bad. And especially with writing too. If that first 5 posts were terrible, don't worry about it. Mine were too. And I had experience when I started writing my posts that were bad. Everybody's first 5 posts are terrible.
I want to talk about a method of educating yourself in AI, and I want to get your opinion on it. Boot camps.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing though. You can go to the best boot camp on earth. You can have an internship in a Facebook. Any of those programs, you can come out better. Or you can come out meh. It's not about the program. It's about the person. And so that's what I want. If I could tell hiring managers any one thing, it's stop looking at the degree and start looking at the person and what the person took out of the degree. If their resume doesn't show me that they learned anything, if it just has that degree on it and a bunch of classes listed, it's like, okay, what did you really learn though? Because if you're interested in getting a job someplace, you're going to tell me what you learned more than you're going to tell me what classes you took and what school you went to. Like I think that's the difference is you look at people's resumes and you can almost segment them by this person, attended and got grades versus this person was there to learn and did learn something. And I think for me, that's the differentiation. You can get that from a boot camp. You can get that from an internship. You can get that through self-study. You can get that through a great university program or a small university program that nobody's ever heard of before. I think there's multiple ways to learn and to allow for every different style of learning creates a more diverse candidate pool and not just like traditional diversity. I mean, like diversity of thought, because different people learn different ways that usually indicates they're going to approach problems differently because they approached education differently.
From the perspective of the hiring managers is probably the obstacle when you enter the fatigue of just going through loads of CVs, right? Then your filter starts to kick in. You're like, okay, screw it. We just want people with masters. I'm tired of going through all of these CVs, right? In fact, hiring managers are not even looking at CVs. You got a script that is doing it now, right? So these filters are built into the system. They're built into the script and they're looking for PhDs and masters. So what you're talking about is almost like a systematic change in the approach to hiring and the thinking that these hiring managers and data science managers are having. Maybe let go of your biases, right?
What you just came up with was I've built one of those applicant tracking systems as resume screeners, and I built it differently because, and it was exactly to your point. And you kind of nailed why we have these is because we have this thing called decision fatigue, where you look at the effort that it takes to make a decision or to do a task. And you also have this concept of effort discounting because you're distant from the reward. You're screening resumes, but the reward is, I got this great candidate who I ended up hiring. That's way out there. And so you oftentimes have recruiters, you have hiring managers who discount the reward, the benefit of doing rigorous screening and using good tools. And so when I created this, I understood this is a decision support system. It's designed to keep people in the loop. So I'm not excluding candidates based on what they don't have. I'm including candidates based on what they do. This is what you were looking for, and here's what they have. Just because they didn't have something doesn't mean I'm going to push them away, because that's taking a decision away from you. I shouldn't do that. And so as a hiring manager, you have to look at your system and say, okay, am I getting all the candidates using the criteria that I've put into the system that I could be getting? Is the reason why screening resume is so stressful because I've got overly strict and poorly written job opportunities? Or is it because, and you start looking at the process from an evidentiary standpoint, from a research standpoint, you're going to realize that college degree, not well correlated with the rewards you want, employee outcomes. That years of experience, not well correlated with the reward you want, which is employee outcomes. you're going to change your process of screening. It's a heuristic process at the end of the day, but you have to find heuristics that are more effective than the heuristics that have already been debunked. And that's what you hear me when I talk about what I'm screening resumes for. I'm looking for individual features, which I have found are well correlated with employee outcomes. Sometimes there's some evidence behind them, but at the end of the day, heuristic is there to reduce the level of cognitive load on me. And so heuristics are prone to biases. No matter how aware of the process you are, get sucked into it. And it's really, a matter of executive function. If you find yourself fading, stop. Don't don't keep going. Take that break, go do something else, come back tomorrow. Because you only have so many decisions you can make well in any given day. If you get into fatigue, you're missing resumes. You're doing exactly what you're talking about, which is you're starting to give into your heuristics and biases and, really just trying to get through the task instead of completing the task in the best way possible.
Yeah.
That's where I think screening comes in, these automated screeners, the decision support systems. They should make that process easier. Your decisions should be simpler, not harder. You should be getting better candidates out of it, but not through a process of elimination. You should get it through a process of inclusion.
Okay. Let's talk about breaking into AI as a professional. So there are several entry points into the AI industry. I myself broke into this industry as a professional by working at a startup. So my reasoning was that the startup provides the best environment for growth. And in a startup environment, you're literally thrown into the deep end very quickly. And there's just usually one or two people in your team. So you're wearing so many different hats. From your perspective, what are the common ways you've seen practitioners break into the field of data science and machine learning?
So if you take the startup route, you're going to get all the benefits that you're talking about, but just make sure that startup actually has someone who's senior enough to mentor you and has enough time to spend helping you develop, because you can get in some worst practices. And if no one breaks you of them, they'll stick with you for 4 or 5 years before somebody finally comes up to you and says, all right, look, so this isn't going to work. And here's what's wrong. So if you can avoid that up front, you will save your career from so much pain, because especially once you get to the 5-year point, everyone's looking at you like you should be the one who knows what they're doing, and they won't correct you anymore, which is scary. And that's a universal thing you want no matter what opportunity you take. Find people who will teach you, who will mentor you, who are capable of doing both, and with time to do both, obviously. But you can get into the field through startups. You can get into the field by working as a software engineer on data science and machine learning projects. You can get into the field as an analyst. It's very easy to get into analyst roles because they're dying for talent just as much as everyone else is. And the barriers to entry on those roles aren't as high. And then as an analyst, you can quickly transition into a data scientist. You can do research in an academic setting, and that transfers very well to being capable of doing data science in a business setting. You just have to create that a little bit of business acumen. It's the only thing you really miss doing it in academics versus business setting is you lose the business acumen side of it. So if you can develop that through a different route, you can get in that way as well. And so there's all of these different ways into the field through these adjacent roles where you're working on data science projects. But if you're one of those people that just took an online course and you're already working somewhere in technology, just use data science in your job. Like, nobody's going to stop you. No one's going to say, no, stop bringing more value than, your role tells you to bring. Stop that. Don't do that. Nobody's going to stop you from that. So you can bring data science approaches into your current job, into your current role, or at least use analytics, use data in creative ways if you're not technical facing. And now you have a project, like a real project where you can show results, you can show outcomes. I use data in this role, and this is what happened. That's the thing that hiring managers are looking for. And so no matter where you are, you can figure out a way to worm data into the process, because everyone's trying to.
Yeah.
You basically coming up to your supervisor and saying, hey, I've learned data science. Can I use it? What are they going to say? No.
And we've spoken a lot about the field, right?
Mhm.
We've spoken about strategy. We've spoken about jobs and interviews, how to break into the field. I want to talk more about you, Vin, your personal brand, right? So you have a Substack
Mhm.
where you offer newsletters on data science, career advice, and what we've been generally talking about in this conversation. And there is an audience for it because your Substack is top 100 in the technology sector, right? And that's amazing. So you also have a YouTube channel, and you have over. I looked it up this morning. I forgot the exact figure, but over 100,000 LinkedIn followers. Give me some. Donate some to me.
All yours. You take them.
First question: why did you start writing on Substack?
Substack was a good way for me to monetize longer form posts and content. It gave me control. And the rhythm that I've fallen into now is I do 2 free posts every week and 2 paid posts every week. And that's a good cadence because people that are paying for my Substack, it's, $7 a month. So I basically price it like a magazine because that's what you're getting really is you're getting 8 articles, roughly 8 or 9 articles every month that are paid only. And it's basically a magazine subscription. So you're getting decent value out of it. I control the platform. I control what I write. I control the timing of distribution, how people get content, how people consume content. So I control my brand. And if you go on to something like Medium or towards data science or any of the others, you kind of lose control of that. There's a lot of external pressure to write in a particular vein or particular topics. And that's just not going to work for someone like me because I'm telling you a view of the field that nobody else has. I'm going to challenge the way you think about data science because there's a better way to do it than is being sort of evangelized by the majority of our data science field. And so that's why I started the Substack is because I don't think I would have the control of brand and the control of content that I need in order to deliver the value that I'm capable of delivering. It's almost like why I started my own business. Nobody else was going to give me that opportunity. Nobody else had the same vision. And, I had to do it on my own. I had to create the opportunity. And it's kind of the same thing with, the Substack, the high ROI data scientist. I have control of the vision. And so I'm able to provide the most value to readers because I'm able to stay true to what I see happening in the field.
Excellent. And the benefits of content creation. What benefits have you realized? You started early.
Mhm.
What can you speak into the benefits?
It was strange when I started in 2014 on Twitter. Thank you, Twitter. There were a lot of influencers.
Yeah.
But the concept of a technology influencer, that didn't really exist. That wasn't a thing. And the majority of us at that early stage were sharing information and we're writing posts to teach, to educate as part of a sales funnel. It was kind of a sales and marketing process to teach people instead of calling people and emailing people. And for me, it was crazy effective to just educate people about what I did and what was happening. And they would just pick up the phone and call me or send me an email. It was insane. It was so effective. I was onto that content marketing thing. And I'm thinking, why is anybody else doing ads? Why are people doing I mean, that's how I got started. I kept going because it was great for business. And so I just started teaching, which was, one of the other trends that I've sort of ran into by accident, which is the massive amount of content out there to teach people pretty much anything you want. And a lot of it's free, which is amazing. I think it should be. The paid version of my Substack is really aimed at very senior people that are in the senior plus, what I call it, group. And so that's where, the paid content comes in and some more stuff that I do that's paid. I think it's really aiming at the people who I started teaching 5, 6, 7 years ago, who are now in these senior level leadership roles or running companies in some cases, who want that like next wave. Like, okay, you helped me out back then. Now help me out now. What else you got for me? And I think that's the great thing about content is you can talk to so many different audiences and you can help people's careers out. And it's kind of amazing.
Yeah. We'll get into the closing questions. So we're getting a bit more personal now. How do you avoid burnout? You've been doing this for a very long time. Even me just doing this for 3 months, I need to take a break and go away, then come back.
Yeah, I don't blame you. The more control you have over the content that you put out, the less likely you are to burn out because I'm sharing my vision now. It's something I truly believe in. Like, I love talking about this stuff. I love teaching clients about this stuff. I love writing about it. Like you could literally let me talk for an hour or two about this stuff and keep asking me questions. I'd just keep going because I like it. I enjoy it. That's how you avoid burnout. You have to stay true to that message that you have. You have to find something that your vision is unique in some way, shape, or form, and everyone has a unique vision. And then you have to share that with people. And you have to take people on a journey with you from where they are now to seeing a view of the world, a view of the field, a view of a particular programming language or capability, a view of something in a similar way to you. You don't have to be right every single time. It's about changing perspective and challenging perspective and providing something unique that makes people think, not think like I do, but just think from a different perspective about what they do every day. And I think that's how you avoid burnout is you have to, because every time I've ever burnt out, it's because I started getting away from my brand, from my vision, from what it is that I do best and the value that I provide best. Every time I get away from that, it's like, man, why did I do that? I could have just stay true. That's those two words when it comes to content creation will avoid burnout.
Okay. I was going to ask you another question. What books are you reading at the moment? It could be in any category.
I'm reading a lot of papers. Hold on, I got my list here. I got to pull this up. My functional memory is kind of trash. I hate to say it. Like remembering what I have in my library is sometimes problematic. Listening to von Clausewitz again on war. I love that. And I think every time you have a shift in anything big, like we have an inflationary shift, we have some technology shifts coming up with Web 3.0, we have geopolitical shifts coming, just hitting us.
Yeah.
I think you have to go back to strategy books and on wars like mine. I go back to von Clausewitz and get a better understanding, better perspective, like big picture perspective of where I think we're going. Change by Damon Stoller. I'm rereading that one again. Seeing Around Corners by Rita McGrath. I'm reading that one again. Those are big. Those are extraordinarily helpful. Following Jay Pearl, who is big on causal, and he's got a group that he works with. They're all great to follow as well. They're moving in some directions on causal machine learning. I'm following Microsoft, Netflix, and Amazon in their directions towards causal machine learning. So not really books, but more, reading papers, following their work, looking at some of the stuff that they're open sourcing. Those are like the main directions I'm going in. I'm following some research out of the field of biology, really around medical epidemiology and their work integrating causal methods and domain knowledge into machine learning. I think we're going to learn more in our field in the next few years by looking outside and getting outsiders' perspectives into our field than we are by just listening to ourselves talk at each other over and over again.
Yeah,
So it's some interesting things to learn from them as well. So those are the main thoughts that I'm following.
Yeah, I agree with the outside perspectives from propelling the field of AI into new realms, because generally that's how it's always been. If you look at maybe convolutional neural networks, it was actually a neuroscientist that did the first experiment that discovered the spatial interaction that the neurons in our brain has. Is a neurons that wire together. That's a neuroscientist saying so. And that essentially is the whole field of convolutional neural layers. That's how it works. So yeah, we should allow that outside knowledge coming in. And this leads me to my last question. Who should I speak to next and why?
Well, there's so many good people in our field. I mean, how about this? I'll email you a list. There's just, because right now, if I do it, I'm going to rattle off two and then I'm going to get done and be like, oh, I should have, you need to
choose one person, just one. Give me one person now, then email me the list later.
If you can get anyone in Microsoft who's working on the causal side, data science and machine learning, if you can get anyone from that group, their causal machine learning group and causal inference group, get them.
Okay.
They are doing some really, really interesting work
Thank you for your time. Thank you for this conversation and the gems you've dropped. Yeah. Thank you for having this conversation with me today, Vin.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a good conversation. I've had fun.